Today we're going to be doing an analysis of the West Virginia Senate election in 2018 with Senator Joe Manchin on the Democratic side and Patrick Morrisey, the Attorney General of the state of West Virginia, on the Republican side. So, first of all, we're going to go back to the 2012 election in which Barack Obama was on the ballot for the presidency while Joe Manchin was on the ballot for the Senate. And the reason why I'm dating back to 2012 is because if we look at the ballot, Joe Manchin was on the Senate election while Patrick Morrisey, the now Republican nominee for the 2018 Senate race, was on the Attorney General race. He won his election 51% to 48%, whereas Joe Manchin won 60% of the vote to his Republican opponent's 37% rounded. And if we look at the margins Mitt Romney won by, they were roughly the same. The Democratic results in the Senate did not correlate with what we saw on a presidential level. Not a single Democratic county on the presidential level, yet only 3 Republican counties out of 10s in the Senate election. So this is something that we really need to focus on. Joe Manchin was extremely popular back in 2012. Since then, his approval rating has dwindled. It dropped 17% from quarter one of 2018 and is now 43%. So that's clearly a drastic swing from 60% to 43%. However, it's definitely in backlash against Joe Manchin opposing the president, and that's something that's really going to hurt him. We're going to make a final prediction today as to who I believe would win this race, but again, the map is never definite. So let's take a look at the Democratic primary. So clearly, Joe Manchin easily swept the Democratic primary against his progressive opponent compared to 2016, where Bernie Sanders easily swept the entire map. So why did Bernie Sanders win every county along with Joe Manchin winning every county? So first of all, Joe Manchin is the incumbent. And second of all, if you look at exit polling data, the majority of Democratic voters in West Virginia did not want a more progressive president. They actually wanted a more conservative Democrat to win. I'm 99% sure, I can't be factual about this because I wasn't the one who voted, nor was I one of the 241,000 people that voted, but I'm pretty sure that this state voted for Bernie Sanders because of Hillary Clinton's comments about West Virginia. The exit polling data does not correlate with the candidates they voted for, my bad. And it really just goes to show how these people vote based off issues. Bernie Sanders was here for the coal workers, whereas Hillary Clinton wasn't at all. Same thing goes for the Republican primary. Donald Trump easily won here. To be honest, he only won because he was one of the few candidates in the race at the time, but he probably still would have won regardless. If we look at the 2018 Republican primary, Patrick Morrisey did not win every county. There's pretty much a divide between the GOP in certain parts of the state compared to the northern parts, more eastern parts of the state. So there's definitely a divide in the GOP, but right now they're probably ready to back one candidate. But the fact that Don Blankenship was able to garner 20% of the vote should be pretty shocking. Someone with that type of rhetoric, that type of prominent racism, that type of prominent sexism really shouldn't be on that ballot whatsoever. And the fact he got 20% really goes to show how some voters vote. And, you cannot deny the existence of the racist and sexist voter. Yes, it's not enough to impact the outcome of an election, but they garnered 20% of the vote here, which is a pretty interesting, but not the best news. But if we look at the West Virginia results for 2016 between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, we're going to point out 3 counties. So the first county is Preston County, where Donald Trump carried 74% of the vote. Joe Manchin lost this county back in 2012. He lost it with 38% of the vote. So clearly, he outperforms where Hillary Clinton got in 2016. Clinton got 19% of the vote. Manchin got, I believe, 38, not 39 rounded. Okay, and then we go over to Doddridge County. So 54% of the vote for the Republican opponent. Okay, if we look at where Donald Trump got, he got 82% of the vote. That's a phenomenal difference and in the favor of the president. Right now, if we look at the president's approval rating in this state, 39% of the state disapproves of him with a 48% approval rating. And if we look at where the map shows, that's kind of weird. Not click on that, definitely. But regardless, I'll delete that in a second. But the West Virginia approval rating of the president right now is at 59%, and this poll shows 48%. But regardless, it's much higher than Joe Manchin's. Joe Manchin in this poll has a 51% approval rating, but I don't believe those numbers. I believe that this was an online poll, so it's not the most accurate. But if we go to the Morning Consult, his approval rating is nearing the margins that it should be, 43% to a 44% disapproval rating. Yes, it dropped drastically from 60%, but it was expected. This is a man who opposes the president, who is the most popular in the state nationwide. So you can't really expect the 2 voter bases to work together, or the same voting base that voted for both of these candidates together, or in different elections, but the same voting base that got them elected. You can't expect them to agree on everything, and they're probably going to turn towards more the president than someone who's from their Senate seat. So If we go ahead and go back to the primary results, the Democrats got more votes in their Democratic primary. That's mainly because Donald Trump was the only candidate on the Republican side, but it just goes to show Democratic turnout is possible in West Virginia. We saw an exact repeat in 2018 with 159,000 votes on the Democratic side, even with an incumbent running, meaning more people shouldn't have came out and voted, and 136,000 on the Republican side. That's extremely interesting. Right now, I think that the Democrats are at an advantage when it comes to voter turnout. They clearly have the excitement. They have the numbers. It's just on terms of whether or not they can back this candidate, one, because 30% of the vote didn't go to the incumbent and went to a Bernie Sanders type candidate, and two, if they can defeat someone like Patrick Morrisey, which is likely to happen. But let's take a look at the polling data. So we go to the general election polling data. Most polls show a Joe Manchin victory, which is something pretty odd in my opinion. If we look at the ones controlled by Republicans, Patrick Morrisey, of course, is in the lead. Ones controlled by Democrats, Joe Manchin isn't taking the lead he shows in other nonpartisan polls, which is pretty interesting in my opinion. His approval rating does not correlate with these polling numbers. So yes, they could be wrong, or the voters in West Virginia could also be just showing backlash towards the president or just voting for someone they really like. They're not always going to be against the president or for the president when it comes to something like a Senate election, because it doesn't make an implication on the presidential stage. Yes, it does have national implications, but it's also something that's close to them and localized. If we're talking about the governor election, which happened in 2016, and let's see if we can actually pull it up. The governor election right now, Jim Justice easily won. Right now, he's a Republican, but in a state like West Virginia, he won 49% of the vote. Hillary Clinton got 26% of the vote. So clearly, these aren't down ballot voters. They are the type of voter who will vote for Democrats if they agree with them, and Republicans, which they typically agree with. Keep in mind, this was a safe Democratic state back in 1992 and 1996. Again, a huge shock that George Bush won it in the year 2000. Let's go ahead and look at the approval ratings again. Joe Manchin has a 43% approval rating, but it's not correlating with the polling numbers. All the data that we have now points towards a Joe Manchin victory, which is why my general conclusion is that Joe Manchin is probably going to win this race. If we look at the generic Republican, it's easily outperforming Patrick Morrisey, which is extremely interesting. A generic Republican should not be outperforming someone who's expecting to overcome and oust a senator in a opposing year's wave. I mean, if you look at the generic Republican poll, yes, it looks like the Republicans should win, but these polls show a Democratic victory in West Virginia. West Virginia is one more Senate seat that, if you add to the Democratic side, would be extremely helpful in their chance of getting back the majority. Yes, the Republicans have 48 seats, but that doesn't mean it's impossible for Democrats to win. Again, if we look at the Real Clear Politics polling of the president, he has a 44% approval rating nationwide. That doesn't correlate with what we see in a state like West Virginia. Trump's approval rating is around 60% according to Gallup in the state of West Virginia, and typically they underestimate the president, meaning it could be at 65, 66%. Right now, 44% of people nationwide currently approve of the president. Pretty interesting, to say the least. Right now, I think his approval rating might tick up to 45%, but it's not going to go over 50 in my personal opinion, just based off how they voted, based off how these people have responded in previous polling data. But Trump approval rating since January, again, he started off at 62%. Now it's at 59%. Not much of a decrease. A 3% decrease isn't enough to make a sudden and drastic change in the states and how they vote. So if we look at this opinion polling data, yes, Joe Manchin is the clear victor. But if we look at the approval rating data, it doesn't correlate with the polling data. So right now, I do think Joe Manchin would be the ultimate victor. I think his primary performance, the primary turnout, the double-digit lead in some opinion polls, the fact that there's going to be a blue wave, and the fact West Virginia voters aren't as decisive and aren't as strict when it comes to their voting patterns. They're not down ballot as shown in 2016, 2012, where a Republican won. Mitt Romney won by double digits, yet the senator from the state, a Democrat, won by double digits as well. The same man we're talking about right now. Again, Joe Manchin is probably going to win this race. Even though his approval rating may be down, the president's approval rating won't make that much of an implication on a state like West Virginia as of right now. This is not a presidential election year, so the stakes aren't high. They are currently happy with the president, which means they probably aren't going to come out and vote to voice their opinion against him. That may hurt Joe Manchin, but they probably aren't going to vote anyway regardless. A lot of people have perceived the state of West Virginia as a safe Republican state, just as many have perceived the state of California as safe Democratic, which could deter some people from coming out and voting. But primary turnout is showing good news for Democrats, so that's something to add to their column. The candidates are all right. Patrick Morrisey is not the best Republican they could have nominated, much better than Don Blankenship, but again, not the best according to opinion polling data. Again, the double-digit leads and the 2012 election results where both of these candidates were on the ballot, and Joe Manchin easily outperformed previous Democrats, almost every Democrat in that state, and outperformed Patrick Morrisey according to the percentage points. So, final conclusion, Joe Manchin is going to win the Senate race here in 2018 by a slim and narrow margin. It's not definite yet. Clearly, I can make a changed video, but after everything that we've seen, not much is going to change between now and November 6th. Thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I'll see you all tomorrow.